down. Let me make sure that I have my sequence here. Mac animation, images. Actually, I'll use something from my other class. Alright, so regardless of what you're going to be doing, this process will be the same throughout every animation assignment that we do. You're going to end up with a sequence of images. So this sequence is something from my intro class. It's a mini room. You probably remember it from your intro class. So I typically like to preview my stuff ahead of time. If you open up any sequence inside of DJV, which is a software installed on the computers, it's free, so you can download it for your own computer. It'll read the sequence, and then you can see what it looks like. So there's my sequence from the intro class. Ta-da! Wonderful. Okay, so it's good to preview it, because if you go into After Effects and it's not moving, then you'll have an idea that something went wrong before you got in After Effects, most likely. Alright, so I know that it works. So then inside of After Effects, I'm going to double click in this window, and then I'm going to go find my images. Okay. Now in After Effects, you just have to double click to import something, or you hit Control I, and then you just click on any one of your images. It doesn't matter which one you click, it will automatically know this is part of a sequence, and you can verify it by the TIFF sequence button that gets checked here, or ping sequence, or EXR sequence, or whatever. Okay, so there's my image. I hit import. Then I drag this to either my composition here or to the render queue, either way. If I drag it out here, let me hit undo. If I drag it here, I can also watch this inside of After Effects. Okay, the other way you have to do another step. So then I'm going to export and add this to the render queue. I click on the word lossless. And if you check your cheat sheet, you'll see it says QuickTime H.264. Okay, so that's going to be the same for all your stuff. QuickTime, and then you'd pick H.264 from this list. I don't have it listed, so just ignore that. And I hit OK. Then I click on my output 2, and this is where it's going to be saved and what it's going to be called. So in my 2540 folder, under Mech Animation, I have a movies folder. So I'm going to go into my movies folder, and I'll call this Sarcona_Mech Animation, or Game of Thrones, or whatever you want to call it. And then you hit this render button here, and then it'll render out. Okay, that's it. Then you get a movie. Now, let's back up a second. If I go to import something else, so that one came in pretty easily. There was no extra pop-up boxes. This Mech Animation will probably give you a pop-up box. So I'm going to grab any one of these. I lied. That one didn't do it. No, that one didn't do it either. All right. What may happen is you may get a pop-up box. Maybe one of these will do it. That'll say, do you want to ignore the alpha, treat it as straight, or do pre-multiplied? Typically on these you want to ignore. If you did straight or pre-multiplied, your sky will most likely disappear. Okay? Because that comes in as transparent. So just hit ignore, that way the sky comes in, everything's still happy there. I can go in here just so you can see it. If I right click on my footage, hit interpret footage main, I can say ignore like that too. So if you do forget, you can always right click on the footage, interpret footage main, and go there. Yes sir.
Bring it in there, do you click on all of them?
Nope, you just click on the one. Just grab any one that's in the sequence, and then you just hit import. Okay, and then you make your movie. When we do the grading for this, I'm going to come to each station. So starting next week, I'll come to your station. You're going to show me your movie. If I need to see any of the animation, we'll open up your file and look at any of the graph editor stuff. Ideally, I just want to make sure that everything is nice and organized. That's it. There's not a whole lot there. Animation is pretty simple to grade. It either looks good or it doesn't look good. Okay. I will be looking at rendering too, so whether you blew out your scene and it's like crazy bright, or whether it's super dark, all those things will come into play. Okay. On Canvas, I have a new one. It's called StickAnimation. You're going to download the file. You're going to put it in your folder. You're going to rename it. So mine's Sarcona Animated Stick. I've copied it. I'm setting my project. And then I'm going to open up the stick rig. Okay. So this is another rig file that you will get at the start of this. Yes, it has mental ray in it. We'll just take care of that later. Shouldn't be anything in here. No, nothing in there. I have. Let me turn this render region off. Right there. Okay. This item is rigged differently than the other one. Every object is going to be rigged different depending on what it does. Okay. The last one was a bunch of circles. If you didn't get it from that one, it's very confusing to see a bunch of circles and try to figure out what each circle does. Right? That was kind of like, don't know what each one does. This one with the stick, it should be very obvious what it does. This top one, guess which direction it moves it? Left and right, right? So just in the X direction. And you'll see I can't even grab it and move it in any other direction. I can't scale it. I can't rotate it, okay? This one is more of a lockdown rig showing you exactly what you can do with it, giving you more prompts as to this is what we should have. This is what you should be using to control this. Alright, guess what this one does? Rotates it, right? And only in one direction. And I can see that direction right here. It says rotate Z. So I can't grab this direction. Can't grab that direction. Only this one. Alright? And that's true for this one, and this one. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to animate this thing coming into the screen. Okay? So initially it's going to start off screen like so. And then this thing is going to move into the screen, stay for a second, and then move off the screen. Okay? So I'm going to just ignore where it is right now. I can always adjust that later. Frame my camera differently. I'm going to just animate this. Alright. So what I'm going to do is I need to set keyframes. So just like before, if we hit S on anything, what is it going to do? Right, it sets it for everything, and then that looks horrible, and then we have to see those keyframes later on in the graph editor. We don't want to do that. So we want to make sure that we've set up our set keyframe so that it only does all keyable from channel box. Okay? If you save your preferences, at the end of the day, you copy that 2018 folder, you drop it into your folder. When you come in the next day, you put it back. You should be good. But if you haven't, then you have to do that every time. So I'm going to frame 1. I'm setting my keyframe for this. Just like before, I have no idea how long this is going to take. I don't want this to be, you can see how where my ground plane is. I don't want this to be him sliding all the way over here. That's way too long of an action. Okay? So I'm going to go to, let's say, 90. And just slide him over like that. Okay? So he goes... And that is pretty disgusting. Let's move that over. Let's go to 60. Alright, that's a little bit better. Okay. And then, like I said, I want him to stick around for a little bit, so I'm going to maybe go to 15 frames. So 60 to 75 is 15 frames. And then I'll go up to 120 and just pull him out of the screen. Okay, so now he does exactly what I said. Comes in, stays, and then goes away. Done. No. Alright, so what do I need to add just to that movement? Anticipation. We could add some anticipation, right? So instead of him just moving, we could have him maybe going back a little bit and then moving forward, right? So if he was on screen, we would have that. But he's not going to be on screen at the start of it. Okay? So he's going to be off screen, so we wouldn't see that. So we don't need that anticipation there. Yeah, just moving him across the screen. So what else could we add to this? Drag, right? So that these little pieces underneath will drag behind it, so it looks a little bit more realistic. We also need to change his speed. Right now he's going pretty static getting there. Okay? So I'm going to jump into the graph editor. Where's my shelf? There it is. Okay, now we do have easy ease on this. Okay, so what happens is it's slowly starting off, speeding up, and then right before it gets to the end, it's slowing down again. If this thing is going to whip like I want it to, because I want those little tendrils underneath to like whip around, if I slow this thing down, do you think it's going to, it would in real world, whip very good? No, it would just kind of like drag or sway a little bit. So the faster it gets to that spot and the harder it hits at that corner, the more flip we're going to make sense of that, right? So I'm going to take this handlebar and I'm going to move it in. Now, just like before, it's not going to let me do moving that handlebar in until I do a couple things. I'm just going to do it to the whole thing. Curves, weighted tangents. Tangents, free tangent weight. Now I can grab that and move it in. I can also grab this one and pull that one out. I can also break these if I find the breaker. Right there. There we go. Alright. Alright, so now what we have, it starts off pretty slow and then flies into it. Okay? So let's see what that looks like. Alright. So that seems like a pretty decent hit. It's still going pretty slow though. Okay? So now I want to move my keyframes over. Because now I'm at the point where I've adjusted the speed. It's just going too slow. I'm going to check my playback speed just to make sure. Yep, we're good. Okay. So I could do this here. So I can grab these keyframes and scoot them over here. Or where's the other spot that I could adjust those? Dope sheet, right? So either way works. So I'm going to grab the keyframes here, scoot them over. And then I'll go back on the graph editor and just tweak this. There we go. So that feels a little bit better. Alright. Now at this side of it, I want him to maybe go a little bit faster here, so I'm just going to pump that up a little bit. I'll even take that and do this. Okay, now what that should do is go slow and then super speed up right at the end. So it goes. Okay. Now, do you remember what he said about exaggerating things? Yeah. What should you do when you're trying to exaggerate something? Go beyond the point and then start dialing it back, right? So this looks good to me, but I still want to see if it's still going to look good after I start exaggerating it a bit more. So I'm going to jump back in the dope sheet, and I can save this just so if you're worried about losing something. There we go. And I'm going to exaggerate this. I'm going to really push these in like that. So I took this from being about 110 frames-ish to now I'm down to 55 for the whole animation. Alright, that looks pretty good. Okay, so I actually like the way that looks. Now I could go further and push it a little bit more and see. I don't know if I want to do that. I'm good with where this is at. Alright, cool. So now what I need to do is create that overlap drag stuff we were talking about. So I could animate each one of these. So I can grab this one here and animate that one, and then come down and animate this one, then come down and animate that one, and so on and so on. That's the long way to do it. If I marquee all 5 of these, I have all of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set keyframes. So I'm going to go a couple frames after this starts moving. I'm going to click on my rotate Z and set a key. Okay? We don't want those to start moving yet until we get to that point. Alright, so then we're going to be here. Now right before it stops, this thing is going to bend backwards. Now because I have all of them selected, it does this. It does a nice little curve on it because it's rotating each one of those pieces. If I only selected one of those, right, it would only do one. So remember he talked about this one's more of an antenna and this one's more of a feather. That's where we're getting, okay? We want whip on this, so we are gonna rotate all of these. And the higher up we go, the more exaggerated it's gonna be, the more it's gonna feel like it's a softer rotation. All right, so now we'll set a key. So now it's gonna look like this. It's gonna go whoop. That feels good. Now what should happen when it hits the end? Goes the other way. Yep. Right? So we're going this way. The second it hits that wall, it should flop over to the other side. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to flip it over to the other side. Okay. Now I may want to give myself a little bit more time here, but I have the dope sheet. If I set it there and I don't like it, I just move them over. And there's no rhyme or reason to this number here. I'm just going with something that looks good. Okay. If you want to get into the physics of it, this is negative 26, so ignore the negative for now. When it flips over to the other side, it can't go, oops, one more, right there. It can't go any further than 26. That wouldn't make sense for it to go like 40, right? That doesn't make sense. Because otherwise, when it goes the other way, then it can go like 80 or something. That doesn't make sense. All right. Whoa. All right, so maybe that's a little bit too drastic there. So we jump into the dope sheet. I grab my keyframes. And I'm just going to, oops, there we go. It didn't load. So I can grab this. And scoot these over some. There we go. That feels better, right? There we go. Maybe a little bit quicker. Maybe like one more frame quicker. There we go. Okay. All right. All right. So now what should it be doing between this frame and this frame here? Swinging back, right? Coming to rest a little bit. It may not ever get there, right? I'm just setting a keyframe and then I'll tweak it later. So it's going to start to swing back. And just for fun, I'll even go a little bit further than, you know, I probably should. And then when we get here, it should be back that way again. Okay. So let's see what it looks like. Yeah, that seems to work. Yeah. And I like to play it back, you know, frame by frame just so I can see what it's doing. Yeah, that actually does seem to work. All right. So now, just like before, we could look at an animation and see this is good. I like the way this looks. But there's always something you can do to it to make it better, to make it more appealing. Okay? So remember what he said in the video about how things trail, right? So when you move your legs, and this is a fact, if you walk and you pay attention to what's actually moving, your thigh is moving, and your thigh moves your knee, and your knee moves your calf, and your calf moves your foot. So it's always like behind. So what is the main item that is moving in this animation? The top. That guy there is what's moving. So what should be the next thing that moves? And then? And then that, and then that, right? So the way we have it right now is the top moves and then everything moves at the same time. And that doesn't make sense. So we have to grab all those pieces again. And then we have to offset them. All right, so here's how I offset it. Make sure I grab them in the correct order. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The other way was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I didn't want that. So 1 should happen first. We already said that. And then 2 should happen after that. So what I'm going to do is go into 2's animation and just move it over a frame. And then I'm going to go to 3's animation, move it over a frame. Go to 4's, and go to 5's. Right. So that just offsets each one of those arms by 1 frame. So that should do what we wanted to. Now, 1 frame may not be enough. I may need 2 frames offset for each one. In some areas, I may need 1. In some areas, I may need 2. We'll find out. Now, do you see how that has a little bit more feeling to it? The way that it's hitting now. It feels a lot more wavy because of how we did that. Now I still feel that this area here might go a little bit too quick right at the end, so I still want to adjust that, I think. I'm going to grab that, go to the graph editor. Oops. And I'm just going to scoot that down some. There we go. Maybe a little bit less. Alright. We're getting closer. There we go. I'm happy with that. Alright. Now, because I tweaked that, the other ones were pretty close enough anyway, but I still want to adjust it. So I'm just going to go in here, grab these last ones, and just scoot that down so that they all happen about the same time. That's right. Okay. Now this is off screen, so we don't need to do the next part, but the next part obviously would be it comes to rest, right? It flies over the other way and then it just comes to rest. If I was to add that in here, my keyframes are offset. So I'd want to reset them so that they're back to where they were, add my keyframes, and then do my offset again. Just so you can see that, I'm just realigning these, just grabbing them. See how I'm grabbing their name? That selects their keys. They're all back in alignment. I'll go to here where it hits. Boom. I will flip it down this way. I will set a key. I'll go up a little bit like this. Set a key. Like this. And set a key. Okay. Now let's look at that again. Okay. So that seems to work pretty good. I want to go look at this frame by frame. That is a huge jump right there, it seems. Yeah. I'm going to go in the graph editor and just look at this real quick. Okay. So remember what I said before about how physically it would be impossible for this to go from a value of 27 to a value of like 30. Okay. Every time that it's coming to rest, each one of those numbers should be lower and lower, basically bringing it to this like closing point. So right here, this is where it's on the other side. It flips to that side, okay, and then it swings back. So that's it's coming back. Let me just adjust this so you can see it. That is this part right here. Okay, now when it hits there, then this one needs to be lower than 20, which it is. And then this one needs to be lower than 13, which it is. And then this one needs to be lower than... Not negative 27, just ignore the negative. And just say 13. Okay, so the next value has to be a number that's lower than 13, so 7. Whether it's positive or negative, it'll just jump to the other side of that 0 line. Okay, every time it crosses here, it's jumping to the other side of the line. So if I set a key there... Oops, let me go past this. If I set a key here, it's at 0. If I rotate it this way, it's going to go below the center line. If I rotate it that way, it's going to go above the line. The idea is that you don't ever have it get bigger. It should not do this. Come on. That. Okay, so see how this is going this far past the line, that one's closer, and then this one goes really far? That doesn't make sense. Alright. Now at the very end of this, I'm just going to add a little soft. It is soft. Okay, that's good. Now I can go through and do my offset. So 5 should be the last one. So I can click on 5. Come on. Offset it. Click on 4 and 5. Offset it. 3, 4, 5. So this is the other way to do it if it's stacked the other way. 5 should be the last thing that happens, so it has to be at the bottom of the stairs. Alright, so now we look at it. Gorgeous. Okay, super simple. All we did was set keyframes on that first part, right? Make sure that looks good. And if you look at it, I set 1, 2, 3, 4 keyframes on that top part. That's it. The bottom ones, I set more keyframes because there's more stuff happening to it. But as long as we animate them all together, we use a dope sheet, we can create this very cool looking thing. Now, I want you to do this first. Keep it simple, coming off the screen and going back, coming on the screen, then going back off the screen, okay? Do that one, and then delete the file if you need to. And then make a brand new one, where you're doing this again, but now you're doing your own version of that. So you can have it come on the screen and wiggle and stop, and then go off the screen. Make it as long as you want, obviously within reason. Do something. I want to see this action. I want to see this effect where it comes out here and it's coming to rest. Okay? Even if you did one whip where it just does like this and it comes to a nice little rest there and then takes off the other way, that's fine too. Okay? That's what I want to see, is some sort of animation with this. Do this one twice so that you can see how to do this process. It took me, I don't know how long this video is, less than 25 minutes. And that was with you guys walking me through it. Okay? So it shouldn't be a huge issue to do one, try it out, see, get your feet wet with it, and then do it again. Okay? With an actual story. The button? All right, let's do this. I'm gonna grab a cylinder here. All right, so pretend for a second. Let me fatten this up. Okay, so pretend for a second that this cylinder is like that. Okay. So I'm rotating this cylinder. That's where it's starting. Yeah. See how the value is 73? Yeah. So I'm going to go up to 30. And I'm going to rotate it. Now, how far should I go with this? What's that? Nope. Well, it would depend on the volume, but let me say it a different way. What's the farthest I can go with this? Right. The farthest I can go is about 73 on the other side. Okay. And that's assuming that there's no air density that's going to hold up this thing, right? Because everything is going to lose speed. So as it's here and we hit the play button, it should dip down. Gravity's pulling it down and then it's pushing itself back up. As it pushes itself back up, it's never going to get to 73. If it did, what would happen is it would go to, let's say, 74, and then it goes to 75, and then it goes to 76, right? And pretty soon it's like looping around and then it freaks out and explodes. So this one, let's say, went to, I'm going to just put 60 just to make that go faster, 45. Then I'm going to go up here, and then this is going to go to, the last one was 50, so this one's going to go to 40, let's say. And then this one will go to 30. Now do you see how I'm not even concerned with the negative? I'm just rotating it to the other side and then looking at that number to see what that value is. Right, for each one of those. Okay, so now watch what this graph is going to look like when I'm done. I'll make this more frames. I'll set that to 0. Come on. Alright, so now if I look at the graph editor here, do you see how using this middle line, it starts off this side and then it goes that far, this far, this far, this far. And you see how gradually it's like coming in to that center line. Yes. That's what should be happening. Okay? Well, it shouldn't go farther than the line. Okay, so this center line right here, this white one. Yeah. Okay, every time it switches sides, it's passing up that center line. That's when it's straight up and down. Yeah. Okay, then it goes to this side. What shouldn't happen, now watch the animation here. Okay, so this is going to go. Alright, so you see how it gradually looks like it slows down. Yeah. Now what happens if I take this and I crank it up? I put this here. Whoops. Put that there. Put this here. There. That here. Okay, so now they're all over the place. This one's at 73. This one's at 140. This will be interesting. Right? That it really doesn't make sense. The physics of it isn't there. When a ball drops, the fastest the ball is going to go is the second before it hits the ground. Okay? So the fastest this thing is going to go is right about there. Yep, and then it's going to slow down. It's going to go super slow, then same thing, and the same thing. Okay. All right, so that's the same thing here. So, right, well, past the previous one, right? So here it went to 20, so the next one doesn't go past 20. And then the next one doesn't go past 13, which was the last one. And then this one doesn't go past 7. Okay? Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it just doesn't go past the previous.
Right. When we're doing something like this, it definitely couldn't. Okay. Now, one little touch-up you could add to this, too, is if we look at the graph for this after we've done that offset, they're all exactly the same, and they wouldn't be the same either, right? So as all of these things are swinging, which one of these do you think is going to have the most rotation?
I would say the bottom.
This one here? Well, think about the physics of how this thing is moving. There's a lot of energy stored here, and gradually that energy is being distributed through the whole branch, right? So most of the energy is on top, the least amount of energy is on the bottom. So this top one should rotate the most. Okay? So if we have that in mind, then number 1, which is the top one, that one rotates the most. Number 2 should rotate the least, or the second. So I'm just going to lower these values. I think you made me mess that one up. I don't remember doing that. Oh no, that's something else. Never mind. So I'm just tweaking these, just kind of lowering these values a little bit, just so that number 2 is a little bit less. And then number 3, I kept number 2 on the board so I can see where it's at. Now I would lower this so that it is below that one. Now again, it all depends on how realistic you want to go. If you're afraid of using the graph editor, get over your fear of the graph editor because it ain't going away. It's just a matter of getting in there and playing it. You have to get in there and just move stuff around, see what happens. It looks complicated, but just keep in mind, all I'm doing here is just moving the graph. Alright, there we go, and then this one will come down like that. Okay. So now if we look at this, oops. It's going to look slightly different. I may have moved those maybe 1 or 2 units. It might be moving a little faster too because those other pieces are now not rotating as much, so they're becoming to rest. So I could have gone the other way too and taken number 1 instead of compressing everything. I could have stretched out 1 and 2 and 3. Okay, that's another way I could have done that. All right, so once you get your other one rendered out, you got your movie, then you can start on the StickAnimation. I close Windows too much.